We've been talking about high-tech processes, high-tech science, but I would like to start with this guy. Some of you may recognize him. This is President Barack Obama, and he went to Harvard Law School and graduated in 1991. When President Obama was at law school, he studied contracts, torts, constitutional law, the usual curriculum for for law school. But I think that if he went to law school 5 years from now, he would have a new subject that he would have to study, something that I would call maybe Lawtronics. And why am I calling it that? Because increasingly, lawyers have to use technology for e-discovery, to discover precedents, to actually come up with strategy. Before, you used to have law school graduates that would be associates in law firms, and they would spend months and months researching cases and going through files. Blackstone Discovery, in just $100,000 in a very short amount of time, was able to do for 1.5 million documents that would have taken an army of paralegals. But law is not the only thing that's going to change. Think about urban governance, public policy. At Carnegie Mellon University, there's a new program that launched in 2013 on public policy. And what are the things we think about when we think about public policy? Healthcare, diplomacy, just war, but also now behavioral models, complexity, scenario analysis, forecasting based on massive data sets. These are all things that have now become part of the curriculum of these master's programs. Let's go on to Georgetown. In 2014, they're also starting a new program with very similar curriculum. What about city governance? We've thought about city governance before, and it always has to do with water systems, police, public health, security. But now at NYU, they have something called urban informatics, which also has data management, social media, and citizen science. And these things are not being done in a vacuum. In fact, governments also see that they require their chief digital officers to need data science education. What's a chief digital officer? Well, in 2009, Mayor Bloomberg decided that he wanted someone who could use digital data to better serve the people of New York. And he put out an advertisement. I was in New York at that time, and several of my friends saw this advertisement. They weren't really motivated. But Rachel Stern was at New York, the New York Times, and she was 28 years old, and she applied for this job. And there she started a new trend that went on to change the landscape of New York and the way that it's governed. She made what was known as a digital roadmap. And in that was included public Wi-Fi for parks, digital learning online. 1 million New Yorkers have learned online. Social media, reaching out to all the citizen and digital engagement through social media. It became so popular, she's become a mini celebrity in New York. But soon after, Chicago had a chief digital officer. Earlier this year, Los Angeles has a CDO. And even Boston has now announced that it will have a CDO. Medicine, we just talked about medicine. But what about doctors? Doctors, the one thing that I remember when all my friends were going to med school was all that memorization. My God, you had to spend all hours upon hours. Yes, you needed to be skillful and you needed to be good, but you had to have a lot of rote memorization to be a doctor. But now, at University of Ohio and at other universities, doctors have started experimenting with Google Glasses. And when they're experimenting with Google Glasses, doing ankle surgery, orthopedic surgery, what they're finding is that they can actually get a lot of the information without turning their head away from the body in front of them, and without having to second guess or ask other people about specifics of the body, because that is superimposed through their Google Glasses. Why did I talk about these three different fields? And I could go on. Advanced manufacturing, we know 80% of advanced manufacturers believe that there's a skills gap. We know that 900,000 IT jobs are lying unfulfilled in the European Union. We also know from McKinsey that 40% of employers that were interviewed believe that their jobs for entry level are lying open because of the skills gap. But the fact is, I wanted to point out that every job, even your job, even though if you're in management or the humanities, if you're an entertainer or Beyonce, whatever you may be, your job has an element of technology and data science in it. And why is that happening? We all refer to this age as the information age. But I believe we've entered a new age, industrial, information, and now I would call it the hybrid age. It's an age where we must live in coexistence with technology, where technology is ubiquitous. And by ubiquitous, I mean that instead of discrete objects such as iPhones and laptops, it's actually going to be an essential part of our built environment. In a lot of sensors that we see, whether it is in carpet so that the elderly, when they fall, an automatic email is sent to their doctors, or even Proteus Biotech, which has a pill that you can digest. And for Alzheimer's patients, especially who tend to forget their medication, it will send an email to their parent or to their child saying that they have digested that particular pill. They're becoming intelligent. This doesn't mean that they're becoming as intelligent as human beings, but even with Siri, we see advanced decision support systems. And most important, they're becoming interoperable. They can talk to each other. This is really key because this changes us from living in an environment where we have discrete objects that we become the intercommunicators for to one that are communicating to each other independently of us. They're social. I don't know if you saw Jibo. Jibo is a new social robot that has been created by Dr. Cynthia Brazil. And it's a really very cute little robot. It got 1.5 million YouTube hits when she launched it on Kickstarter. And the whole point of this robot is that it's assisting you in your everyday work. If you're in your kitchen and it will remind you about the recipe for a salad you're creating, you don't have to take selfies anymore because Jibo will take pictures at birthday parties. And this is, again, something that we'll see, this social dimension to robots. And finally, and perhaps most critically, technology and computational analysis becoming cheaper. I get emails all the time as a small business owner from Google and Amazon. They're literally slashing prices of Google storage. They're competing because it's become cheaper for them to provide analytics. Well, what does that mean for education? It means that STEM, or science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, is fundamental part of every field that we enter, but also that every field is multidisciplinary. So this is a cover of Wired magazine. And on this cover, the man sitting down, kneeling, is Hugh Hare. Hugh Hare is a professor at MIT Media Lab, and he lost his legs in a climbing accident when he was young. But then he went on to MIT, and he started a curriculum and a department of biomechatronics, which combines biology, mechanical engineering, and electronics. And this is something that we'll see more and more. In every single field, we'll see that there are multiple subjects that we have been teaching in silos that are going to come together. And the education system must change to trickle this down right to the schools and high school level as well. But who will teach us all this? Who? Well, I think that we can't rely on universities alone. This whole idea of the ivory tower has passed its time. Really, this artificial divide between industry and academia is not fruitful or useful because innovation is happening very fast and commercial organizations happen to be at the forefront of this innovation. And we must partner with them when we create new kinds of academic curricula. I'll tell you who's very motivated for this kind of thing. A country that has no natural resources. A country that imports 90% of its food. A country that has small land mass and only 5.5 million people. That country is Singapore. Earlier this year, the Minister of Education, Minister Indrani Raja, invited me to participate in a program that they called Aspire. And the whole point of this program was to increase applied education and integration between industry and between their technical and polytechnic institutions. It was about better choices, deeper skills, and multiple paths. And what they mean by this is that they were going to work with Cisco to create professional certifications that would actually be accredited education programs. That they were going to work with Keppel, the Marine Infrastructure Organization, to create better internships that people could take while they were at schools. Now, we've seen that happen in Germany. We've seen that happen in Australia as well. But in Singapore, they're really trying to make it much more integrated and much more aligned with future technology and future innovation. But what about countries where we don't have enough teachers? What about countries that are still just developing their universities, that don't have the millions of dollars that Singapore has? Well, for them, we can count on what is known as a global brain. And in this case, this poor boy in India, who was destined to be perhaps a mechanic, can now, on his mobile phone, see a course that Sebastian Thrun, a former professor at Stanford University, has now provided for free. And he can become a collaborator of the future. So for countries like the US, or Australia, or Singapore, this young man is your future collaborator, and he's also your future competitor. And it would be wise to collaborate with him now, to be able to have your students go into these MOOCs or massive open online courses and begin to take them together and see how you can collaborate. And also build it all upon this massive computing power that IBM is providing in terms of Watson, that GE is providing in terms of their data lake. This is computational power that you can use to actually build new applications and new products and services. So I think I would say STEM is key. Being multidisciplinary is key. And then the final thing is, then what's left? Well, here's the idea. Ideas are really the scarce inputs in the world. Eric Brynjolfsson and Andrew McAfee wrote a very famous book called The Second Machine Age. And before that, they wrote Race Against the Machine. And their point is the following, that actually scarcer than both capital and labor. So you may say labor costs in China are going up, which they are, but then you have ASEAN, you have Vietnam, you have Indonesia, you have Malaysia. And maybe manufacturing costs or marginal are going down because of advanced manufacturing. Then your most important resource is the ideas that your human capital have. And in this, we should now revise what is known as STEM. I know I came here to talk about STEM, but really the new language is STEAM, and the A is for arts. It was started by Brown University, and now increasingly everybody talks about that. You look at great scientists, and they're always inspired by some form of art. And yet we teach physics and computer engineering and chemistry in this very strict, dull way. That needs to be changed. Just a few days ago, there was a report that in Australia, high school students are leaving sciences in their final year. That's a great tragedy. But maybe the reason is that they're not inspired. And one of the reasons maybe they're not able to connect it to real-world problems, and they're not able to be creative with it. I'm going to give you two examples of schools that I really like. In Estonia, they're teaching first graders how to code. This is known as Project Tiger, or Programming Tiger. And in Estonian it's written, I know how to program in Java. What do you know? It's a classic little thing that a young boy who's punk would say. But it also shows the way they approach programming. Look at him. He's confident. He's open. He's not hunched over like some computer and alone in front of an iPad. He's very free. And this is the kind of cultural message we need to give when we talk about STEM. And finally, this is Quest to Learn. Quest to Learn is a program that started in 2009 in New York University, and they encourage every child to think in terms of systems thinking. Systems thinking is really important because of the interdependence between disciplines and between economies. And so they are actually building a bridge. And they're literally taking just whatever they have around them, to build this. And then they simulate it using video games. This program, believe it or not, is a public school that you can get into through lottery. And it's the dream of many New Yorkers, such as myself, to have our kids in such a school. But the key over here was that using technology as a tool, being able to understand how it's applied, but most important, to have the freedom to be creative with it, is really what makes for a resilient future workforce. Thank you very much.